Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karawawahai, Tejasvina Vadhi Tamastu, Ma Vidvishawahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. I will revise for us so far, verse 11. This is how chapter 2 has started, and the whole Gita is commencing, the knowledge commences from chapter 2, verse 11. So verse 11 to 13 talked about, Krishna says, the wise do not grieve for those who are gone and not yet gone. So this is initially, a new thing that we hear, and it's not how we think. And we may sort of think that the wise person is, cold, or they're somehow distanced from the world. But to the contrary, they're very much in the world, and yet there's a certain understanding. And what is this understanding? That my true nature is awareness, and awareness is your essential nature, your intrinsic nature. And we use the word in Sanskrit, Swarupa Lakshana. Swarupa means its ownness is awareness. So awareness is not something other than awareness. So you can't say awareness is something else. It is awareness. And then we said, conversely, there is your body and your thoughts with which you are now, your mind with which you are thinking and listening to these words right now in this moment, and the body with which you are sitting. And we call that instrument your incidental nature. And incidental nature means it is not essential. Now, why is it called not essential? Why is your body right now not essential to you, who is awareness? And therefore, why is this? And why is your mind not essential to you, awareness? Because if you look at this presence, which is ever present, ever available, it doesn't need your body to remain in a constant state. Your body can go through many changes, and yet there's a presence that remains. Your moods can go through, right, from morning to evening, through many states, and yet there is a presence through and through those moods. You can have many thoughts, some of them very inspiring, some of them are sort of normal, some of them are more down to earth. So all of those thoughts, no matter what quality of thoughts, you can have the greatest, most sublime thought ever of oneness. I experienced oneness. So even when that thought is gone, there is you are there, right? So in every experience, there is one commonality there. And what is one commonality in every experience? I am, right? You are there in every experience. What else is there? But every experience is not in another experience. So an experience of sadness is not in happiness, and happiness experience is not in sadness. So the experiences change, and yet there's a presence that remains. So this means, in that sense, the states of mind, your body conditions, your health, and so on, it's not essential. Therefore, we call it your incidental nature. And then verse 14 to 15, then we changed the topic slightly. And we said that if you look at the objects, there's a tendency, if you open your eyes and you see your body and you see your life, and you naturally want to, uplift yourself. You naturally want to embellish your life with goodness. So when we open our eyes, there's a tendency to objectify something and give it a lot of value. So what Krishna says in verse 14 to 15 is, he says, the wise person, Arjuna, is encouraged to look at things objectively. So what does this mean? Look at sense objects objectively. Sense objects could be anything that we see, that we hear, that we imagine, or anyone in our life also. Objectively doesn't mean, for example, looking at it like this or like that. Just seeing what's the intrinsic value, what's the real value of this object versus my imagined value. So if I take a golden watch, right, it used to be a big thing, right? Maybe Apple watches are nowadays, I don't know, but watches used to be a big thing a couple of years ago, right? Remember that? And we kind of used to all go, oh, just expose your watch, make sure everyone sees your watch. Right. And why? So this, I mean, it's just a bunch of gold. It's from the ground. It's gold put together in a little hand, and a long hand, short hand, and gears. It's just a McDonald's $5 mechanism, basically. And yet there was this thing to expose, and I'm scratching myself, just make sure you see my watch there, right? So this means we are putting so much value on something that is dug up from the ground in Africa, and people, probably felt, from thirst, getting that, extracting that gold. So this means I start to see the intrinsic value of this watch. It's there to give me the time. It's useful in that sense. But when I lose my objectivity, that's when it becomes a binding, what's called a binding like or a dislike. Now, a binding like or a dislike means that without this, I can't live. Without this, I am not good enough. Without this, I won't be loved. Without this, whatever this is, it's not just a watch. It could be wife, husband, child. It could be anything that is dearly precious to you. Without this, I am incomplete. This is called a binding desire or binding like and dislike. So what happens here is that when you have a binding like and dislike, it denies you from freedom of expression. So what this means is that you have a natural ability to express yourself, and we all love to express ourselves in whatever ways that we feel is the right way to do so. But then when the binding like and dislike comes, it says, no, you shouldn't do this. And we cannot quite rationalize why, but there's this inner conditioning that says, this is, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't be like this. I cannot dance like no one's watching. I cannot, just kind of make a fool out of myself. So there's some innate program that is holding us back. So in this sense, it becomes binding. Another example in a relationship is when you depend upon your partner for their well-being, because their well-being you depend upon so much that love turns into control. So what happens is that I need this person to, be so well protected, because if they get hurt, then my life is over. And this actually reminds me of something I noticed when I was small. My dad had this thing. And whenever my mom, she tripped over sometimes or fell, right? It happens, right? We fall sometimes. My dad used to get angry. And it was the most confusing thing ever, because me and my brother were saying, Dad, what's wrong with you? Our mom fell down, go and help her. And you're so angry and it's the end of the world. And I never understood this until much later, that this is an example, right? It could be deeper than that, but it's a good example of a binding love where I depend on my wife's well-being so much that when she gets hurt, it shortcuts that natural program to go and help the person. You become so invested in your own in preserving that object for my well-being that it just cuts down that expression of helping this person. So in this sense, a binding like or dislike becomes denying my freedom of expression, denying me as a human being. So this means we have to sometimes ask ourselves in our private time, is there some like or dislike or something that's holding me back that it would be better maybe a little bit to loosen it up? So it can help you a lot, because it can really just free you to be yourself. And now in verse 16, then again the topic has changed. And Krishna says that he made a statement. He says, whatever is seemingly real, right? Whatever is mithya has no absolute existence, has no permanent existence. And whatever is absolutely real, it never ceases to be. So whatever is truly, truly real, it always remains as it is, and it never ceases to be. It cannot ever end. So to answer this, we brought the prakriya of Satya Mithya. And Satya Mithya, what do we say? We said that, for example, see these two words, Satya Mithya, they are not objects. So there's no such thing as an object in the world called Satya, or an object called Mithya. You cannot visualize this. They are simply words that explain the ontological order of reality. What is ontology? Ontology means the study of the nature of an object. If I look at an object and I ask myself, what's the nature of this object? That study, that analysis into the nature of the object, that's called ontology. So now when I say Satya Mithya are ontological categories, that means they're words that describe the ontological order of reality. So this is what Satya Mithya intends to show you. What's the nature of an object? That's it. It's simple as that, because we're surrounded by objects, right? So we have to ask ourselves, what's the nature of an object? But then we need a method. We can't just say, what's the nature? Well, it's like this, it's like, you need a method to arrive to the constituents that makes that object up. Then we defined what satya means. We said that satya means something that is independent. So it doesn't depend on something else for its existence. It is of its own. It stands on its own. And mithya, we said that it is contingent on something else for its existence. That means mithya cannot stand by itself. If you look into it, it depends on other variables. It depends on other things for it to exist, to be. There's another word that most people understand, which is the word tucham. So satya means that which stands independent, and tucham means that which is an illusion. So what does this mean? For example, cold fire. Is there such thing as cold fire? No. Or sky flowers. Okay. So it doesn't empirically exist. It only exists when you put two things together and your mind just goes on a tangent. It creates something. So in this sense, the word tucham, Tuccham, means it is unreal. It is completely illusionary. It is imagined. So now you take this shirt and we say this shirt, suppose we say it's satyam, right? And we say, yeah, shirt, it's a functional shirt, it's whatever, you can put whatever adjectives you want onto it. That's besides the point. It's a shirt. And why is it a shirt? Why is the shirt satyam? And then you answer, you say, well, because the shirt stands by itself. It is, for now it stands. Before you do any analysis, it stands by itself. But now we get a little bit clever and we take a little strand and we start to pull out the yarn from this shirt. And then you just see, Andre speaking here, and you see the shirt, slowly disappearing one by one. But as we're pulling the yarn out, we're making a big fluffy ball of yarn in our hand. And now, you just see now the white, right? That's all, it's gone, magic, right? Now I'm holding a ball of yarn. Okay, now yarn becomes satyam, right? Yarn becomes satyam. Why? Because it's standing on its own. Okay, we don't have to analyze beyond. It's just like the shirt was standing on its own. The yarn is now standing on its own. But now, if you turn your head back to the shirt, which is no longer, what category will we now give to the shirt? Can we call the shirt tucham? That the shirt is imagined? No. Why not? Because while the shirt was here, I was not imagining it. It had a function. We were wearing it. We were universally speaking about it. There was no question of anyone imagining the shirt, just like no one is now imagining the yarn. Can we call the shirt, which is no more, right? We only have the yarn now. Can we now call the shirt satyam?
No, can it be called a transactional reality?
Well, okay, let's suppose we don't have the transactional reality yet word about. Suppose we only have these two words. See, right now there's no shirt. So can I call the shirt, which you don't see, can I call it satyam? Why? Because where's the shirt? What shirt are you talking about? You're holding the yarn, Andre. That shirt, which was satyam, it's now the yarn. So you can't say that the shirt is satyam because the yarn is satyam. So you cannot call the shirt tucham. It's not imaginary. And you cannot call the shirt satyam because the shirt is no more. What's satyam? This is satyam now, the yarn. So we are in a little bit of a problem. So this means that if you remain with these two words, you know what happens? You have the social media situation where either things are right or they're fake. Fake news or they are right. Like this is right and this is fake. This is how the world goes about 99% of their black or white thinking. This is called black or white thinking. It's either right or it's wrong. It's either true or it's fake. So this means as long as I stick with these two words, where is my thinking? It remains highly shallow. So this means to understand the shirt, we need to add one more word. And what is that word? We say, while the shirt, right, existed, while it was existing as Satyam, all throughout its existence, it was depending upon the yarn. So this means the shirt had no real existence of its own. It was it was using something else. It was contingent on something else for the shirt's existence. So therefore, this contingency upon is what we call mithya. So therefore, what status is the shirt now? Or what status was the shirt all along? It was not Satyam, because this is Satyam, the yarn is Satyam. What was the status of the shirt? It can only be mithya. That means while existing, and by the way, this doesn't just apply to the shirt, this applies to anything that we take. While it was existing, it didn't have a reality of its own. So what does this mean? The word mithya helps you understand, gives you a cognitive understanding of an object. If I don't have the word mithya, then I can only look at objects as it's Satyam or it's fake. And where is your understanding there? It's very shallow. So this means when mithya comes in, then I'm able to analyze the layers upon layers upon layers of an object. Okay? Now, to extend upon this inquiry, we then use the example of a pot and clay. Okay, so before I go to pot and clay, so what does the word mithya mean? It means it is seemingly real. It doesn't mean illusion. Did you notice how many times we kind of, in the spiritual world, we dismiss the world as illusion? And the world is illusion. You know, they say Maya is illusion, the world is illusion. No, because to say that the world is illusion is to dismiss it as tucham. The world is mithya. This means whatever I see in the world, it enjoys a dependent reality. The moment one dismisses the world as an illusion, what happens? Immediately their buddhi cuts off. There's no more inquiry. I remain at a superficial level. It's like this, there's no need analysis, and then one's forced to dismiss it as illusion and then claim ownership of themselves as some awareful, conscious awareness. Therefore, they live in this sort of a Advaita, right? It's all Advaita, but there's I'm Advaita, and this is not me. This is not me over there. You see the problem there? So it's kind of an Advaita thing, and this is very hard to explain unless we go through this analysis. To further this analysis, we then used pot and clay. So if we look at this object, initially it has two names. It has pot and clay, but actually there is only clay here. So this means that the question that we have to then ask is, why is there two names? There's two names. In fact, there's only one thing here. There's only one thing. There's only clay. But owing to the fact that this clay is obtaining as in a shape as what we then call a pot, then we have to, for transactional, as Bao said, for transactional reasons, give this a name called pot. Now, the next question that we asked was, so even though it seems separate, pot and clay, upon inquiry, there's only clay because the pot depends on the clay. Then the next question you have to ask is then, what is more right? This magical word more. Who is more right? Is the pot more right or is the clay more right? You will naturally say that
The clay.
the clay is more right. And why is the clay more right? Would someone like to answer briefly? What's the logic behind it?
Because you cannot
pot.
take clay out of the pot, because the moment you take clay out of the pot doesn't exist.
Good. So in that sense, whereas conversely, if I take the pot out, if I break this object, then the clay remains. Whereas if I take the clay out, there is no pot, there is no fork, there is no plate, or whatever the object was made of, whatever the object was, whatever the name was. So this means, who is more right? The answer is clay is more right. Why? Because clay is closer to the isness of what this really is. Clay is closer to the actual nature of this object. So if I say pot is more, right? Pot is farther away from the nature of this object. And clay is closer to the nature of what this actually is. So in that sense, whoever is more right means it's closer to the isness, to the actual nature of what we are looking at. So in this sense, all throughout this pot, there is one substance which it is depending upon, and that substance is the clay. So this pot has no existence without the clay. It cannot be called a pot unless it is pervaded by the clay. And where is this pot? Is it above the clay? Is it below the clay? Is it on the side of the clay? Is it inside the clay? Is it outside the clay? Where is this pot? Where is the spot in relation to the clay?
It's in the clay.
The pot can't exist without the clay, basically.
In other words, it cannot exist without the clay. So the question was, where is the spot in relation to the clay? Well, what pot? Because which part should I now call pot, right? Should I call this little thing here pot? Should I call this little thing here pot? Should I call this pot? What pot are you talking about? There's another nice example given of a chariot. You know, a chariot, we call this a cart made out of wood. And, you know, imagine the wheels are made out of wood and the seat is also made of the wood and, you know, the whole structure is made of wood. And now, which part of that wooden chariot is the name chariot? Which part is chariot? Is the little spoke of the wheel, is that a chariot? No.
The whole thing.
Yeah, but okay, so all of the parts put together we call a chariot. But then which specific part, right, is a chariot? Can you actually find a chariot in a chariot? No, because what should I call the seat that I sit on? Is that a chariot? No, that's called a seat. Is the side rails to prevent me from falling out? Is that a chariot? No, it's not a chariot. Is the rung of the wheel, is that a chariot? It's not a chariot. So even though I call it a chariot, I can't find a chariot. Why? Because the chariot is mithya. The moment I look into the nature of the chariot, I recognize it enjoys a different kind of a reality. It's made up of many parts. In that same way, this pot, similarly, I cannot find a pot. Therefore, where is the spot in relation to the clay? Where is it? You know, it's pervaded by the clay. There's no place where the clay is not. It's not above the clay. It's not below. It's not on the side. The whole thing is just clay. Therefore, the pot name, called pot name, depends on the clay, and clay remains independent of the pot. So what kind of a relationship do they have? The pot and the clay? They have a satya mithya relationship. Okay. Now, when we, for example, chant the words Purnamadav, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, what is this? This is a perfect example of a satya mithya relationship. So what do we say? Purnam adaha. So the whole is, right? That is the whole. So what is that? The whole, the total. The whole, the one content from which everything borrows, the one content from which everything borrows. Purnam idam. This is the whole. The pot is the whole. So the clay is the whole. The pot is the whole. Purnat, if you take the whole, if you take mithya, if I take name and form away from the whole, from the clay, have I actually taken anything away? I've only taken name and form away from the clay. So I actually haven't taken anything away. So that is the whole, this is the whole. Take the whole from the whole, and what remains? Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Whole alone remains. So is mithya a real addition onto the satyam? Is this spot a real addition onto the clay? No. If I convert this, suppose it's a little bit more malleable, and I convert this into, and I subtract, I remove this pot into some flat surface. Have I subtracted from the clay? No, I haven't. So this means mithya does neither adds from onto Satyam, nor subtracts from Satyam. Why? Because when there is a Satya-Mithya relationship, all that is here is one. The only reason why we have so-called duality is in reference to the names and forms. Okay. Now, when it comes to the world, you have to take this one step further, and you have to say, okay, so let's analyze, for example, the pot. Pot has the exact same relationship to whatever the pot is made of, right? Which is the clay. And then the clay has the exact same relationship to whatever the clay is made of. Suppose it's something smaller, and it is, right? It's made of silica, it's made of some soil or something, right? So now you don't have to kind of go, oh, what's the relationship between atoms and clay? It's the exact same relationship. So this means that quantum physics, right? They also will perform this Satya-Mithya relationship, no doubt. In fact, they already know about Satya-Mithya. But what is their thing? They cannot find the final building block. Why? Because if they use the Satya-Mithya, they will go into atoms. That's their specialty. They will use their instrumentations to go into quarks. But then what kind of methods do they use to look at reality? They use Anumana and Pratyaksha. Pratyaksha, that means use their perception and instruments that amplify the perception. And they use Anumana, which is perception-based inference. So this means they will infer. What is inference? Well, for example, how do you tell that the earth, if I perceive that the earth is, I open my eyes, the earth is straight, right? It's the earth is straight. It's a flat earth. Okay, the earth is flat. Okay, we can all now join the movement. But how do I negate that? I have to use inference. So how will you use inference to understand that the earth has a curvature? Well, you have to kind of think a little bit. So if you go to the northern hemisphere, right, where the curvature is like that, you will see a certain arrangement of stars because you're looking that way. If you go to the other side of the world, you will see a different arrangement of the stars because you're looking that way. So if the earth was flat, then whether you look at the North Pole or the South Pole, the arrangement of the stars will be exactly the same. But they're not the same. Therefore, there is a curvature of the earth. That's called inference. Another way to infer is you say day and night. If the earth was flat, then you would never have a day or night situation. So this is generally what inference means. Now, what happens is Vedanta has to take over because physics cannot go smaller than quarks. So what Vedanta shows you is it adds two more Satya-Mithya relationships that we have to understand. And that is knowledge power, Ishvara, and Brahman awareness. So before I get into that, the reason why you have to solve the equation is because can you have an infinite mithya going on? So can you find like this depends on atoms, atoms depends on quarks, quark depends on this depends on that. If you go infinitely, then you will not have this object. Why? Because you need some final substance, which is the final building block of everything. If there is no final building block, if there is no causeless cause means a cause which is not caused by something else. That means it is the final thing and nothing caused it. It is of its own. It is independent of its own. It is the final satyam. Now, if I cannot find the final cause, the final satyam, and I just say that this clay pot results into clay, clay into atoms, atoms into quarks, quarks into whatever, that into da, and I just keep on going like that, what happens? That's called infinite regression. That means I will never find the final building block of the universe. And if I cannot find the final building block of the universe, then there would be no pot. Because it would just keep on infinitely going into mithya, 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 mithya. Where is the final building block? Okay, so this means there has to be a final building block. And what is this final building block? Well, Vedanta then says it is knowledge and power. So what is, and this knowledge and power is, in one word, we say Ishvara. Ishvara just means cause of the universe. Okay, we will talk about efficient cause and material cause much later, but for now, just cause of the universe. So if you look at what is Ishvara? Ishvara is a power that brings into manifestation different forms. So what it does is it puts together quarks, arranges quarks together to manifest into particles. And it puts particles together to make them into atoms. But it's not like the atoms and the quarks are a different thing from knowledge and power. The quark itself is knowledge and power. Okay? So from knowledge arises the quark. And the quark then becomes intelligently organized to manifest as a proton or a neutron or electron. And then the proton, neutron, electron, they get organized together to form atoms. And then atoms get organized together to form molecules and so on. Now, you will notice the more we go upwards from quark into atom, into molecule, into form, what happens? At one point, there's a sameness, isn't it? At the level of the atom, the world is relatively the same, isn't it? It's all one at the level of the atom. The world is oneness. Why is the world oneness? It's just atoms. There's nothing much to know. There's not much to know about an atom. It's just basically electron, proton, and neutron made up of quark up and quark down, not much. But the moment you start to go from atom upwards, what happens? You have more and more differences. So this means you combine atoms and go into molecules. And then what happens at the level of the brain? Look at this. Brain is nothing but atoms. How much is there to study about an atom? Well, there's so much to study, but how much is there to study about a brain? A lot more. Why? Because even though atom is made of knowledge and power, and brain is made of knowledge and power, why do we have a lot more study time for a brain? Because there's a lot more knowledge that makes up the brain. Therefore, what is Ishvara? It is not only forms that are organizing themselves intelligently to manifest as a next assembly upwards until you have this world of variety, but it is Ishvara is also the laws which manifest, which facilitate the governing of these forms. So they work together. What kind of laws? For example, your physiological laws. Do you dictate what happens when you put the food inside your mouth from that moment on and you swallow? Are you making that happen? There's a law. The moment the food falls in the stomach, a certain law activates, the enzymes start to digest the food. Psychological laws. We all act based on, for example, urgency. When there's an urgency factor, how do we all kind of act? Oh, I got to get it now. It's urgency. It's scarce. Let's go. So there's a certain psychology. When I see that what do they call it? The clock, as a woman, my clock is, ticking. So there's a certain urgency factor that comes. Do you control that? Did you subscribe? When I turn whatever 20 or whatever 30, right? I'm going to suddenly feel urgency. No, it's a law that is built in. So this means that all of these laws, cause and effect laws, how fast will sound travel? How will, two objects, when they hit together, how would that impact? What happens when you split an atom? How much energy would that release? How will atoms interact together? How will they combine together to form a star? These are all laws, biological laws, physiological laws, psychological laws. Laws of thermodynamic laws, heat laws. How will heat, how will it expand and contract a substance? All of these laws in them, which are also manifestation of Ishvara, knowledge and power, in them are these objects, which are constantly interacting together and thereby, governing how these objects work together. So what is Ishvara now? It is the governor of the universe. And not only is the governor of the universe, but also the one who manifests all of these objects. And how do these objects correlate together? By the interaction, by the presence of these laws. Is Ishvara some entity? No, it's not an entity. Why? Because Ishvara is this intelligence which manifests the forms and manifests the laws. And then these forms intelligently interact together within these laws. And what are the other two laws that we haven't mentioned? Law of dharma and law of karma. So what is law of dharma? When we get born, we are all inculcated with a natural program. I don't want to hurt myself and I don't want to hurt you. Nobody has to learn this. Now, why do we violate this? There's two reasons why. Because number one, I carry over my past impressions and I override that. That's why you can have bullies from a very young age. And second of all is because of the environment that you're born in. So therefore it becomes sort of a normalized thing to violate these laws. And I don't see the cost in the future of violating certain laws. So for that, you need a certain intellect, which is why sometimes the kids, they will do, certain bad things, but when their intellect starts to develop in their teens, then they will start to pull back from those things that are not so healthy. Why? Because they're able to see the consequences of violating dharma. So the point is these two laws, dharma, what is the right thing to do, how to carry myself, how to speak to you, how to conduct myself in this world, and also karma. Karma is basically when you do something, there is a reaction, there's a consequence, an unseen consequence, which you then have to deal with in the future. And so this law of karma tracks every one of your actions. It never kind of misses it, and therefore it returns the corresponding result.
So can we say that Ishwar converts the subtle into gross?
Does Ishvara convert the subtle into gross? Both the gross matter, that the gross body, gross objects, gross elements, and the subtle elements, in Sanskrit we call them tan matras, doesn't matter, just 5 elements, okay? 5 elements are a manifestation of Ishvara. So this means that, so they arise out of Ishvara's knowledge and power. Just to give you a relatable example, Pankaj, for example, you're now thinking, how can this world that I'm touching and feeling, how can this object that I'm pressing and it's so hard, how can this be made out of knowledge? How can, gross, how can this be made out of knowledge? And then we use a simple example. And the example is of your dream. You have right now the potential to create a world that is gross. Gross walls, gross, gross chair, gross earth, solid objects. Of course, a dream is a little bit fluid, but the idea is the entire dream of mountain and all of these, subtle and gross objects, they're made out of your mind. And your mind, using its knowledge, using its stories, it projects a world that is very palpable, very graspable, very tangible. And you're totally believing it. You're totally buying into the whole thing. You think, wow, I'm walking, I cannot go further than the wall is stopping me. And yet the whole thing, not only the person who's trying to go through the wall, but also the wall itself, both the subject and the object, they're just manifestations of knowledge. So this example shows you that it's actually possible to have that you had the whole thing is just knowledge, right? Taking these forms at the smallest particle, whether it's a gross particle or your thoughts, because we said your thoughts are just 5 elements, subtle elements, okay? So the whole thing is just manifestation of intelligence, taking the appearances of this world that you and I are now experiencing and talking about. Okay, so now, is Ishvara an entity? No. Why? Because Ishvara is, what is Ishvara? Ishvara is infinite possibilities. For example, as I said last week, we didn't have computers or we didn't have certain things in our life about 40 or 100 years ago that we have right now. So Ishvara is infinite possibilities that I, through my free will, have to collapse by looking or tuning into the right mode of thinking. That's how we have inventions. We say, we have a problem. Now let's devise a solution. How do we extract energy from the sun? Okay, let's think about converting energy into a certain process. Let's create solar panels. So this means solar panels were already there. The possibility was there. And through my actions, I have to collapse these possibilities. And depending on what possibilities you collapse, because when I say the word you are just one of the manifestations of Ishvara. So it's not like you're outside of Ishvara. Okay, so that means you, one of the manifestations of Ishvara, has to then, right, work my way through life to ask myself, what is it that I want here? What's important for me? And Ishvara allows you to have that as long as you put your, effort, time, and energy behind it. Now, the thing is, of course, we put endless energy, time, and effort into this world. Okay, we study the world, we want objects, we want this, we want that. But then we have to, one moment, shift the focus and say, what's the nature of this subject right now? What's the nature? And according to this knowledge, the nature of the subject and the object is knowledge and power. So it is Ishvara playing with Ishvara. It is the whole thing is Ishvara manifesting as you, manifesting as objects, and you, being one of the manifestations of Ishvara, are now participating with Ishvara's objects in a form of tree, in a form of another person. And then all of the emotions that you're experiencing as a result of doing so, even those emotions are knowledge and power. And so the whole thing, in a sense, you are swimming in God right now, all the time. So now, if we ask the question through this understanding, is Ishvara an entity? Is it some kind of an anthropomorphic, God up there? No. Ishvara is the presence, the knowledge and power, which manifests as all of these things. And through your constant, work in this world of forms, you collapse different possibilities. So this is important. Why? Because if we ask the question now, is Ishvara planning your life? Is your life somehow scripted by Ishvara? This whole thing's scripted. You're just playing back what's already been written. Such a common belief, I tell you. No, your life was never scripted. You came with a general predisposition, a general trajectory. Sure, we come with some skaras, right? A general kind of a condition. But then very soon, you're in this field of world and you make decisions on a consistent basis. And depending on what decision you make, you collapse a possibility. And that's the kind of life that you live, based on your constant collapsing of decisions. What should I do? How should I do it? When should I do it? Why should I do it? And then Ishvara being what Ishvara is, the one who gives you feedback, which is also Ishvara's manifestation. It says, this, my dear, is not quite healthy for you. Look for another way. So this means, is Ishvara punishing you, considering you constantly have a chance, another opportunity to say yes? No, Ishvara is not punishing anyone. This is another idea that we have of some anthropomorphic God who is from top down with a thunderbolt, jolting us through, showing us a lesson. Let me teach you a lesson. No, who's teaching you a lesson? You're teaching yourself a lesson through the choices that you collapse. In other words, you choose one option and then you put it out into the field, into a field of Ishvara, the Kurukshetra. The field returns a response, and then Ishvara gives you certain feedback, which you don't choose, by the way. If I go and lie, what's going to happen? I will feel guilty. That's a law that's already built in. And through that guilt, I can say, wait, this is not healthy, because it is very obvious this is not how I want to live. Therefore, let me change my approach. There's a cost if the laws of Ishvara are violated. And through this feedback system, one can slowly start to course correct and make the right decisions. Now, to close this argument, then Vedanta says there is one more fundamental reality that even Ishvara, or knowledge and power, depends upon. And what is that reality? It is what we call in Sanskrit the adhisthana, the substratum, the final building block of everything, including intelligence, including the 5 elements, and the thinker, and this teacher, and the student, and the object, and time, and space. And what is that? It is awareness. And what is awareness? We said it is sat. What is sat? It is existence, but it is not object existence. It is the existence from which all other objects borrow. Okay, so we cannot say that Sat is some object over there from, like, we're now extracting. Ishvara is extracting from existence. The whole thing is existence, which is taking the form of, this world that you're experiencing, taking the form of Ishvara, Ishvara taking the form of the quark, quark taking the form of the atom, atom taking the form of the tree, and so on. The whole form, the whole is a whole play of Satya Mithya. So what's the nature of this final building block? It is of the nature of existence. That means it is the existence which is not bound to time nor space, and it is of the nature of awareness. Now, how do we know that Ishvara depends on awareness and existence? Well, because Ishvara exists, right? No different than pot. Pot exists. Now, which mithya, like, look at this, pot exists, clay exists, atom exists, quark exists, intelligence exists. So they all enjoy one common existence. All throughout every mithya, there is an existence. Pot is, clay is, atom is, molecule is, quark is, intelligence is. So all throughout, there's a common isness. There's a common existence. They all depend on existence. And what is the nature of this existence? It is the nature of awareness. Why? Because can intelligence intelligently organize itself to form a quark unless it's in the presence of awareness? That's like saying, hey, I want you to come up with a great idea right now. And you say, I've got an idea. Let's build a house. Come up with an idea of a house, a new house, maybe a pyramid or something. Do you have an idea? You say, yeah, I have an idea. And I go, and how did you get that idea? Well, because I thought of it. Yeah, but what was that idea depending upon? It was depending upon you. It was depending upon your existence, and it was depending upon your awareness. So just like an idea cannot be concocted, cannot be thought of without an awareful being, in that same way, you cannot have knowledge power putting together, organizing, reshuffling this entire universe, reshuffling itself constantly, unless it is in the presence of an awareful conscious being. And that awareful conscious being right now, how is it known to you? As I am. I helplessly am in the presence of all mithya changes, all mithya forms, from one part of the body to another stage of the body, from a childhood to an adult. There is one common I. In every one of these forms that are changing, there is one common I that is in and through all of them. So therefore, that I becomes the final building block of the universe into which this whole thing resolves. And that is what you're experiencing right. That is what's being experienced right now. What is being experienced? This knowledge power reshuffling itself, reorganizing itself to manifest as one person called Liam, one person called Pankaj, one person called Stephen, one person called Arkiri, one person called Gautam, one person called so on, one insect, one dog, one leaf, one sun, one star. The whole thing a play of intelligence. And that intelligence finally resolves into awareness. Therefore, what is the relationship between Ishvara and Brahman, Ishvara and awareness? It is a Satya Mithya relationship. And therefore, awareness becomes the final building block of the universe. Now, to continue this inquiry, then Krishna, again, changes the topic a little bit, and he says between verse 17 to 25, he says this Atma, which is Satyam, the final self, which is Satyam, the final building block of the universe, of everything, of time and space, is what? It's all-pervading, it is immovable, it's all-pervading. Why is awareness all-pervading? How do you get to this understanding that awareness is all-pervading? That your awareness is not yours, by the way, it is all-pervading awareness? Because we just said that knowledge power manifests the universe. That means it manifests space and time. Is space all-pervading? Space is all-pervading. I know the scientists will say, no, there's an expanding universe. No, it's an infinite space, but the planets are going farther away. So space is all-pervading. And what's the truth of space? Of total space, which accommodates all objects? It is knowledge and power. And what is the truth? So therefore, knowledge and power is all-pervading. And what is the truth of knowledge and power? Is awareness. Therefore, awareness also becomes all-pervading. So this Atma is all-pervading. It is immovable. Why is Atma immovable? Would someone like to contribute?
Yeah, because since it is all pervading, there's no other place where it can move.
Yeah, it's a good one. So in other words, there's no kind of a unexplored territory that Atma hasn't yet percolated. It's yet to kind of drill itself through to the other side of the wall. The whole thing is one self in whom everything is. And it's also, it is unchanging again. Why is it unchanging? Because the whole thing is Atma, the whole thing is awareness. So how can it change from awareness to awareness if it's already awareness? It's the whole thing is one. And it's beyond the reach of weapons. It cannot be slayed. Now, what does this mean? Atma cannot be slayed. Okay, can the pot slay the clay? Funny question, right? Can the pot slay the clay? No. If the pot were to take a knife and slay the clay, what would it actually slay? It would slay the pot. It would slay the name and form. It would not slay that which it depends upon. It would not slay the satyam. It would only slay mithya. So in this sense, Atma cannot be slayed because Atma is the substance of everything. And it cannot be dried, it cannot be wet, it cannot be burnt. Why? Because all of these are subject to 5 element compositions, right? Your body can be burnt, your body can be dried, your body can be dehydrated, but that is all mithya. It is not, therefore satyam is not affected. So now, if I ask you the question, does what is happening in this world, does that affect Ishvara? Because there's so much crime in the world and good stuff also. Does that all load Ishvara, everything that's going on? Do all your problems become Ishvaras? Otherwise, Ishvara will be the most loaded being in the universe. And yet we're now asking for help. Hey, Ishvara, help me out. I want to find my way back. And yet Ishvara's like, oh my God, leave me alone. Everyone's crying out to me. Everyone wants my help. I'm trying to run this whole universe. No. Ishvara is not contaminated by anything. Why? Because when it's a satya-mithya relationship, whatever happens at the level of mithya never affects satyam. Just like when the spot is slayed, it does not affect the clay. When the clay is burnt, it does not affect the atom. When the atom goes out of existence, it does not affect knowledge and power. So this means knowledge and power, while manifesting as the whole thing, manifesting as your brain cells. Who moves those brain cells to think of criminal thoughts? Does Ishvara do that? Or the person does that through their own choices? Ishvara doesn't go, hey, I'm going to make you think in a non-effective, kind of a dirty, dark way. I'm going to make you think like this. Ishvara is not a being who is commanding us. Ishvara just supplies us the equipment, supplies you the equipment of the brain, supplies you the brain cells. How I choose to move those brain cells is entirely up to me. I can make those cells fire and wire in such a way to go out and help, to contribute. I can make those cells fire and wire to start to say, hey, I'm going to manipulate my way into something. So this means Ishvara just supplies the equipment, but what I feed the equipment with, what kind of thoughts I feed this equipment, and what decisions through my own act of free will I make this equipment do, that is the kind of experiences that this equipment will take on, not Ishvara. Sometimes we think, so who's making me do all this? Why am I like this? Like, why am I like this and you're like that? Why do you have two? Did you ever ask yourself this question, like just spontaneously, like, why do I have this life and someone else that life? Why do I act like this and someone else acts like that? Why am I in this position and someone else is not in that position? Not because Ishvara put you there, but because since beginningless time, there was a cause effect, there was a continuity of life, getting you to this point now. Okay, so this means that Ishvara just simply supplies us this equipment, and we, through our acts of will, we make this equipment function in a certain way. Awareness and Ishvara have nothing to do with it. You have appliances, right? Suppose who wants to be a toaster? Okay, Arkiri will be a toaster. Riki. Okay, now someone can be a boiler, someone else can be a fan, and someone else can be a kettle, right? For heating water. Okay, so now all of us have a different appliance nature to us. But then you jolt one current, one same current through all of these appliances, and we all start to do our little thing according to our nature as an appliance. Is electricity making us do it? No, not at all. Electricity is just innocently showing up. And in the presence of electricity, the appliance does according to its nature. Now, with that, it's a little bit more tricky. Now, what if you can ask, what sculpted this appliance to be like this? What made this appliance to be like this? Let's call this cause-effect relationship of reincarnation, right? For there's a doer who does an action, who accumulates certain samskaras, certain ideas, what is life about, and then that passes on into the next life. And therefore, you now shaped yourself as a toaster. And you go, oh, I'm a toaster. I don't like myself. I'm worthless. Yeah, but at the same time, the person is given the chance to redefine themselves, because that's what Ishvara is. Endless possibilities that I can collapse. Any moment, I'm given an opportunity to say, yes, this is what is important to me. Now let's start to transform a toaster into something that people are more fond of, like what? An air conditioner in a hot day. So this means there's no such thing as, oh, it's my destiny. I am meant to be like this forever. The doer has sculpted themselves to be who they are right now. So therefore, we are given this chance to come out of this cycle of, right, birth and death. And this is another possibility given to us by Ishvara. Okay, so for this reason, 17 to 25, verse 17 to 25, Atma is cannot be burned, cannot be slayed, is not affected by whatever happens at the level of the person. So now, can you say that, oh, I've done bad things in my life. Oh no, I'm going to get punished. Think about this. Suppose the pot slays another pot, okay? If the identity of this pot is in the potness, then this pot definitely will pay the price. When this pot shifts identity to the clay, its nature, that which makes it up, then when the pot slays the clay, I have not slain the clay. What has slain the clay? The pot has slain the clay. My body, mind has done an action. The action belongs to a mithya, and I am, right, much, much more than just this pot. I am that which is inhering in all of the pots as the clay. So this means that as long as my identity is in the person, in the body, mind, then whatever the person does, who's going to pay the price? The person will pay the price. So this means one moment comes when you say, so this means there's something about me that is much bigger than this person, which is free of this person, which is all pervasive, immovable, unchanging, beyond the reach of weapons, fire, and water. That's my real nature. So whatever this person does, whatever karma this person has, it doesn't belong to me. Until then, how will I come back into this world wearing another body-mind instrument, another pot instrument, until I shift my identity to that which is the truth of myself, In this case, it is the clay.
Yeah, hi. I had a question about this seeming differentiation of, like, Ishvara is in everything, is energy, is knowledge and power, is all pervasive. But then we have the concept of the doer who has been put, like the toaster, etc., all the, right, with a certain design has been put or manifested. But then it feels like there's a split that happens, because from that manifestation, then there's decisions to be made that then determine the path. But this is also, is this not also Ishvara acting?
Yes. I understand exactly what you want to communicate. And so it is Ishvara, and Ishvara is supplying me this body, it's supplying me the brain to either collapse possibilities of more doing, right? More kind of becoming someone, right? Becoming some person in society or whatever. But I'm also equally given an opportunity to discover my truth and come out of this cycle. Come out of this cycle of being born, going, oh, why am I, next to my mother's chest, right? Again. So this means that I am given that opportunity to stop that. And all of this is facilitated by Ishvara. Now, the question is, since how long has this been happening? How long have I, as an individual, you as an individual, been here? There was never a time when you began. You were always coming wearing a body. Right now, you're just wearing a body that looks like that, right? Called Raina body, Andre body. So there was never a time when the individual said, I want to stop this cycle. I want to change my identity. I want to understand the nature of this reality, that everything resolves into Ishvara, and Ishvara's truth is awareness, which is my truth also. There was never a time when any one of us here or anyone that's alive on earth has ever done that. This is why we're here, back here. So there's only one life that a person out since beginningless time that they come. And they, through Ishvara's grace, Ishvara has to bless you. You have to have a certain kind of a privilege, right, in your life. You have to have done certain kind of punyam in your life to come to this place. And Ishvara kind of through, search situations and, ups and downs, it sends you the tradition, it sends you the guru, and the guru, also having understood the reality, that explains the exact same thing as they've understood from their teacher. And you then eventually come to the guru, and now you understand exactly what the guru understands. And from that moment on, you, assuming you understand, that is your last life. And how do you know you understood? Because there's no more doubts. You understood the whole vision. All the pieces of the puzzle have now come together. There's no, oh, there's one piece of puzzle missing. Oh, I'm worried. It's all just final piece of the puzzle has been put, and it all makes sense. And when it makes sense, what happens then? Well, the body, the doer, continues because it's not your design. It's Ishvara's design. So see, this is a thing. We think, oh, right now I'm now teaching, me teaching. No, it's just an instrument, like an appliance that is teaching, that is doing according to its nature. Everyone here has a speciality in life. That's a fact. Everyone's good at something. Why? Because the nature of the appliance is such that it's good at that. But the confusion is putting my I as the doer. So when I understand I am much bigger than this one doer, I'm much bigger than all of these doers, then I have made the most important, biggest possibility has been collapsed. Ishvara has granted me the biggest possibility. And for a short moment of time, the body continues, right? Kind of doing its thing, because you still have to pay for the bills. You still have to please your spouse and children and so on. This is all going to continue, right? But there's a certain contentment behind it all, that, hey, I figured, it's by the grace of Lord, I've been blessed with this knowledge, and I've solved the biggest problem. The real reason why I came here has now finally been collapsed. And then what happens eventually is Ishvara takes your body away when your prarabdha karma runs out, and you finally, Om Tat Sat, Ishvara, you now take me. You decide whether I get a new body or whether I have understood. Ultimately, you decide what is to be. So there's no question of sort of, oh, I've understood, now I can die, I'm not coming back. So, right, there's a certain humility about it. And right, but meanwhile, we just do our work, right? We're not concerned like you understood or not. It's a personal, quiet journey, and you do the work slowly. And and then Ishvara takes your body away, and now I am, as I always was, one in whom the entire thing obtains. I am Ishvara and Brahman. The whole universe is in me, even right now. But why is there a body right now? If the whole universe is in me right now, why is there a body right now? Because there was never a time when I solved the problem. There was never a time when this individual, this doer, life after life after life, understood its truth. That its truth was much bigger than just one single entity in this universe, going from one life to the next. So finally, one life, this doer, the subject, starts to inquire through the pramana and the guru and recognizes its truth is much bigger than just a bunch of flesh, a bunch of thoughts, a bunch of concerns, a bunch of memories, much bigger than all of that. The problem is then solved. And what happens for the rest of us? Well, for the rest of us, we stay in this world, which is nothing but Ishvara, which is nothing but awareness. And so we now get a chance to also solve the problem. So everyone before us who has solved the problem, where are they now? Well, they're right here as your awareness. From there, see, kind of a little bit dualistic now, but just bear with me, because when you create these images, it's like, oh, they're over there, I'm here. But if we were to create some possibility of understanding, some visual, the whole universe, I am Brahman, the whole universe is in me. I am resting as myself, as the infinite self, limitless. But then I open my eyes. Oh, not yet, not yet. So you have to wait for your body to slowly go away. Then you have what we call official moksha. That's called videha mukti. So yes, there is moksha. Moksha means you're alive while you're free while alive. What does it mean to say free while alive? I understand the satya mithya relationship. That means I am free, right? I, as Brahman, am free from this body, from Andre, from the whole world, from the universe. But you could say, but still, there is a body that you have to bear. So there is still pain that you have to go through. There's still cancer that you have to kind of endure if it's to come. Still eyes are going to, sort of go down. They're going to, start to collapse slowly. So does this mean that knowing Atma is going to improve your senses? You know how many people think this? It's crazy. They think by enlightenment will suddenly mean no cancer. I will never be sick again. It's just endless. Knowing the content of the clay, still the pot will fight with other pots. It will still go through problems in life and joys in life. It doesn't affect the clay. So it's a cognitive understanding that I have. As a wise person, I have this cognitive understanding. That's the shift. That's moksha. So moksha is nothing but this cognitive understanding taking place, and you just put things in the right place. I don't have to deny or collapse or remove forms. Do I have to remove these spots to get to the clay? Let me destroy the pots. Let me destroy the world so I can come to non-duality. I don't have to do anything. Just know wherever there is world, there is the five elements. Five elements reduces into knowledge and power, which is putting together all these forms in a, since beginningless time, and will continue to do so. And it's endless possibilities. And one of those possibilities is for you to collapse, to understand that your truth and Ishvara's truth is one. That is a possibility that is given to all of us. When the person chooses to collapse this, that is up to them. I try to tell this to my parents so many times, doesn't listen. Oh, yeah, good, yeah, nice. Oh, how's business, son? Goes back to normal, right? You can't. It's like, oh my God, you got all the knowledge in the world. You're not taking advantage of it. And then you slowly learn that's how it is. Someone can be staring right at you, like close relative, family member. Still, you're as good as power. You're helpless, just watching. So all I can do is say, okay, no worries. There's no grief for mom and dad in a couple more years, maybe 20 years, I don't know. Subtle body continues, but one life they too will come to the guru, to the pramana, and they will hear the exact same teaching. And maybe then, oh, I should have listened to son 5 lifetimes ago. But I won't remember that. So that's how it is. So maybe that's their punyam. But, yes, Gautam.
Can we, could you just tell me how can we point out the difference between Brahm and Ishwar? Where can we say, what Brahm is not and what Ishwar is not, what Brahm is, what Ishwar is? Where's the overlap and where's the distinction?
Sure. So Ishvara, it's constantly in a flux. So knowledge and power has to constantly rearrange itself to manifest as a quark. So if I drop this right now, right, see, every time it's going to, see, intelligence has to now reshuffle itself to make this little pot go from here to here to here to here. You don't see it. It just happens so quick. It's like frames, one frame, another. Ishvara is rearranging itself here, now here, now here, now here. So constantly this intelligence is changing. It's reorganizing itself to accommodate the differences in this universe, right? To accommodate us making decisions, us making, certain collapsing different possibilities, okay? Not only that, but this knowledge power goes through 2 cycles, manifest and unmanifest. So this means that not only is it changing in terms of reorganizing itself to manifest as you and I right now, to manifest as this world right now, but it's also going from pralayam, mahapralayam, right? So, dissolution into manifesting the universe. So this intelligence goes from potential to manifest, potential to manifest, potential to manifest. But not only is it doing potential manifest when the universe, right, in terms of the universe coming and then resolving and then coming and resolving, but even right now, it's doing that. Because if you just say it's resolving, manifesting, unmanifesting back then, who was there to document that? Nobody. So if I speak like this, it becomes a belief. If I can prove it to you right now, it becomes knowledge. So how do I prove to you right now that intelligence is constantly going from manifest to unmanifest? Easy. 5 minutes from now, something's going to happen that is not here right now. You're going to have a thought right now. That thought is in potential. That thought is yet to come. When it comes, then intelligence, since the whole thing is intelligence, it's going to be manifest. But right now, 5 minutes is unmanifest. But what is here right now and what is equally here 5 minutes from now? I am. That I am is awareness. So question, what is the difference between Ishvara and Brahman? Brahman is that which is constant, invariable, and Ishvara goes from manifest to unmanifest. It's constantly manifesting to accommodate the next moment. Like the seed, right? The seed is kind of, unmanifest intelligence. And when it sprouts, it's now manifest intelligence. And when it grows into a bark, it's again constantly manifesting. Intelligence is constantly manifesting itself to obtain as a full-grown tree. Okay? Whereas awareness is the final content, which is never changing, remains attributeless, remains, its nature is of existence, which is of the nature of awareness, and it is anantam. Sat Chit Anantam. Anantam means there is no second, like someone said. There's no place where it's not. So one's variable, one's invariable. Okay. Now, Gautam, I don't want to use these. I can use pravaha nityatvam. I can use kutastam. I can use parinami upadana karanam. I can use vivarta upadana karanam. I can use all these words, but it's not the time yet now. I know you know these Sanskrit words. I don't want to overload us with too many Sanskrit words, okay? But I will much later talk about the technicalities of Ishvara and Brahman. So the way that the teaching works, by the way, is we don't overload you. Just slowly build up, because the brain cannot, take too much at once.
Thank you.
And verse 26 and 29, Krishna talks about reincarnation. Now, what is reincarnation? Well, reincarnation is, how do we all start out? We all have an account called Sanchita Karma. Sanchita means well collected. Now, what does well collected mean? Well, just like your genes, your DNA, your genes are well collected. What does this mean? It means that your genes that you're carrying right now are perfect reflections of your parents. And their genes are perfect reflection of their parents. And so it goes like that for generations. So whatever genes you have now, it is a perfect carryover of generation after generation. Now that's at the gross level. That's the Sthula Sharira. Now in Vedanta, we also have the exact same at the subtle level. And that subtle level is what we call a causal body. So causal body is, your samskaras. So everyone gets born with a certain proclivity, inclination, desire. In summary, just desire, right? 2 people can get born, 2 siblings. One will have desire for artistic expression. One will have desire for nerdy, so they say, right? Nerdy mathematics or nerdy computers or IT or something, right? So now it's totally different desires, and yet they're born to the same genetical framework. but different desires altogether. So what science doesn't attribute is what we in Vedanta do, which is called a carryover of your sanchita karma. So sanchita is equivalent to DNA, just at the level of personality. Okay? So now we all come with this sanchita, which carries over different desires and different inclinations, how you would generally conduct yourself, how you would think, what will you generally like and dislike, right? And one portion of that sanchita gets taken and assigned for one life. And that one portion, you're now playing out that one portion, and that one portion is called prarabdha karma. Now, prarabdha karma in Sanskrit means prakarshena arabdha. Prakarshena means carefully begun. Prakarshena arabdha means carefully begun. Why is your prarabdha karma called carefully begun? Because it drips little by little, never too much that your pain is unbearable. Every day delivers a little bit of more hardships, a little bit of joys, but it never just sort of dumps it all at once and go, oh, I wasted myself. It starts out, gives you maybe 80 or 90 years worth of dripping. And so every day it drips one drop and you go, oh, my day today is not so good. Next drop. Tomorrow, oh, I'm feeling some joyful, everything's so good. And so this prarabdha karma sets your trajectory in such a way that you experience pain and pleasure every day, a little bit, just enough to handle it so that the person doesn't commit suicide every day. And thereby, when you do experience this, what do? Do you just witness this objectively? Like, I'm so detached. Nobody does this. We all respond. We all respond to enjoy. We all want to hug. Yay, someone's coming to you hug. And now you form a conversation. So now you throw a new action into the Kurukshetra, the field. And when you throw a new action, that action now becomes another name in Sanskrit called agami. Agami means what is yet to come, future. So this agami, most of it doesn't exhaust, the results don't come back to you in this life. The reason is because you're busy receiving your prarabdha karma. That's why you can't receive all of your agami, because your prarabdha is to be lived out the whole life. And I'm busy responding to my prarabdha karma. Now, when I respond, I generate new karma called agami. Now, some of that agami goes back to you, right? Some of it comes back to you in the form of goodness or troubles in life, whatever, right? But most of it, upon death, spills into sanchita, well collected. That's why it's well collected. That means nothing drips out. It goes right back into the doer's sanchita karma. And therefore, what happens? Now the sanchita cannot ever be exhausted. This is why you cannot just not do anything and just expect your sanchita to suddenly empty itself out. It is infinite because the person, the doer, has been here since infinite time. That's why your sanchita is infinite. So this means your sanchita is yet to give you experiences that you have no idea what they are. Experience of a bird, experience of an ant, experience of a clown, experience of a parent or a goofy person, an intelligent person. All sorts of experiences are all stored in the sanchita, and it is yet to be lived out. Therefore, the only way to get away from this sanchita is not to empty it out, but to understand I am free of this sanchita. This sanchita belongs to Andre. It doesn't belong to me. That's the only way to stop rebirth. And this is what we call moksha. That means I've shifted my identity to be as good as this person to being much more than this person. Therefore, now the sanchita is not going to me. Because I've got no connection to sanchita. So for that reason, there's no new body. Because as long as there's a sanchita, what happens? It gives you a new prarabdha, and prarabdha always needs a new body and mind to experience pleasure and pain. That's why in the scriptures they say, what is this body and mind? It's a place where pleasure and pain is experienced. It's a place so that I can get a slap. How is someone going to slap you as a ghost? Suppose you're just a subtle body floating around as a ghost. How are you going to get a hug and feel love? You can't. You need a physical body. Therefore, the physical body becomes a mere means by which I can get a slap, or I can meet the guru and come out of this cycle of creation. Okay. Yes, Steve, and then we will go into verse 30.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying on an intellectual level, but that begs the question, how did one's karma initially begin?
Yeah, okay. How did one's karma initially begin? So if I go back to, see, there's a common question. We say, what came first, the body or the karma? Okay, because you need, right, results of actions. You need that sanchita. The sanchita presupposes there was a person there, right? There was a body there, right?
Sure.
So karma presupposes karma just means results of actions. Results of actions presupposes there was a body before the karma. But the body is a result of karma, right? The body cannot come unless there is karma before it. So on one hand, it's like, hey, what came first? Did the body come first, or did the first action, the first result of action come first? The paradigm of thinking is incorrect. Why? Because it is a cyclical paradigm rather than a linear paradigm. So as long as I think there was a first, for the first time ever, I appeared in this existence as an individual, and therefore I started to do, and I got my karma, and then I had to kind of, live out another life. This is wrong thinking. So this means there was never, the only logical other explanation is there was never a time when I began for the first time. It was always going. Since beginningless time, I had a body and I had karma.
So if I can understand intellectually that awareness is infinite, but in terms of cause and effect, so if your actions beget consequences, there must be an initial cause for one's personal karma, irrespective of whether the awareness is infinite or limitless.
Yeah, so there is no cause at the level of the individual. There is no first cause of the body or the karma, because the thinking has to go away. That thinking is linear. It's a cyclical creation. This means in a circle, right? When did I begin first time ever in the circle? Did I begin here? Did I begin here? Did I begin here? Did I begin here? You can only say I began if it's a line. Like I began here, before I wasn't, right? So the first cause came in time, right?
Sure, yeah.
But Ishvara is not in time. So this means to say first, I have to now say that, right, I came in time, but everything came from Ishvara, and Ishvara is not in time. Ishvara is beyond time. And wherever there's Ishvara, there is an individual. And wherever there's an individual, there is karma. So Ishvara being beginningless, individual being beginningless, karma being beginningless.
So does that mean that actions and consequences are at the level of appearances in that sense?
Actions and consequences are at the level of appearances, at the level of mithya, yes.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you.
And I will just do one verse, which will close this self-knowledge part of chapter 2, verse 30. Dehi nityam avadyoyam, dehe sarvasya bharata, tasmat sarvani bhutani, natvam shochittum arhasi.
Bharata, Arjuna, this Atman, the indweller of the bodies of all beings, is ever indestructible. Therefore, you ought not to grieve for all these people.
So the conclusion here is that it's a conclusion between the Dehi, the indweller, which is awareness, and Deha, which is the body. And it says that I am the Dehi, which is of the nature of Sat and Chit. And for a time being, I've been given this Deha, this body, right, which is going through 6 changes. And so whatever these 6 changes are, right, it's nothing to do with me. It's just at the level of the appearance, at the level of manifestation. And what are these stages? Well, suppose you are Jayate, you are born, then assuming you asti, assuming you survive, you have to vardhate, you have to grow, you have to go through that maturity, that's viparinamate, you have to then kind of reach a certain stage of your life, you know, peak, wherever that peak is, and then you have to kind of bear the body, you know, slowly coming down. So all of these are 6 stages. So basically you're born, your body survives, it grows, it matures up, it starts to decay, and it finally, you know, it has to end. And this is the job of the body. It is made to go through this. And now the confusion is when you mix up these 6 stages to me, to myself, my nature. And so therefore I am born, I am declining, I am going downhill, I am rotting away, I am, you know, so intelligent now. So not only does it build a sense of complacency and sometimes, you know, almost arrogance, because like, oh, I'm so great now, but it's just the mind that's really reached a very nice stage of its livelihood. So the person has to have some perspective, what is what here. It's not about denying. And in that sense, what do we do then? Since I become these 6 stages, then the body tries to become immortal. The Atma tries to become sorrow-free. Because what is sorrow? You know, when you say the wise person, the awareness is sorrow-free. Now, awareness is placed where? In the body, in the mind. So what does a person try to do? Make their mind sorrow-free. Make their life sort of, you know, emotionless. Like, so this means, again, it's an attribution error. I've mistaken the mind as myself, or try to make myself as the limitless one, as the body. So the body, you know, all becomes about health and wellness and taking extra care, which is very important. And I highly encourage exercise, you know, because it keeps your brain healthy. But then it becomes this huge thing about these 6 stages. And so what Krishna is saying is that the body will go, and it has to go. And while it is here, it is entrusted to you and I, and thereby it is to be used responsibly, because it is not your body. You were blessed this body. An ant wasn't blessed your body. A dog wasn't blessed your body. You were blessed this body. And because you were blessed the body, which is capable of ascertaining the highest knowledge and coming out of this cycle, it is thus to be used responsibly. So now when Krishna says, do not grieve, why? He's not saying as an advice, don't grieve. He's simply saying the wise person does not grieve because their vision of what is much greater than one who is yet to know. They understand there's something about them or this individual who is dear and near to them. There's something much bigger than just this physical body. For that reason, they have a certain objectivity towards events which are understandably so not so you know, enjoyable to see someone that's dear and, you know, close to you pass away. So they have a certain understanding of reality. It's not about advice. Don't grieve. Don't you know, be pure. No, it's an understanding. My nature is already pure. But then when I, you know, impute that onto the mind, then, right, person tries to purify their mind endlessly, which is important. But again, the relationship has to be kept clear. Okay? And so the next verse, Krishna so far has shown to Arjuna the nature of Atma, who you are, the nature of the world, has shown Ishvara, has shown the relationship between the forms, Ishvara and Atma, and has shown your nature. Now, the next question, logically, is, having understood this, or as we will further understand this in the future, how do I live? What is to be done while living and still bearing this body? Having now relatively understood of this vision, what is to be done while living? And thereby the next verse will focus on duty and karma yoga. Okay, so this ends our section on self-knowledge in chapter 2, which is a big section, as we can see. But we will, right now, from then on, add more details. But I've now given you the foundation of self-knowledge. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.